So, on the previous video, I did 13 and 15, so I want to go for number 14 right now. Now, there are some of these that do get really confusing. This one's not one of them. You always start by seeing if you could pull out something from all four terms, and there's nothing to pull out. There's no A's in all four terms. There's no multiple of 2 in all four terms or multiple of 3 in all four terms. So we move on to factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping, step 1 is to make two groups. 2a squared plus 3a space plus 6a plus 9. And then you factor what's in common in the first group. What could you pull out of that first group? Just an a. What could you pull out of the second group? A 3. Okay, now let's go back to the first group. If I pull out an a, what's left over on the inside? A times what gets us a 2a squared? 2a. A times what gets us a 3a? A 3. Let's go to the other one. 3 times what gets us a 6a? 2a. And then 3 times what gets us a 9? 3. Now, at this point, you should be feeling good because you have the same exact binomial here and binomial there. So I'm going to pull out, this is step 3, the most complicated one, where you take a step back and you pull out that common binomial in both groups out here to the front. So you take the 2a plus 3 and 2a plus 3 and you put it out here in the front. So I'm going to use exaggerated parentheses, and I'm going to do the 2a plus 3 out there in the front. What's going to be left over in our exaggerated parentheses? So yeah, a plus 3. If this is gone and that's gone, the only thing left is this a and this plus 3. But instead of leaving it like that with the exaggerated parentheses, we're going to write it with the appropriate size parentheses. 2a plus 3 times a plus 3. This is your final answer. And of course, you could check your answers. They're on the back of your notes that I gave you the other day. So we already did 15. Let's go on to something more fun. 16 is not that fun. 17 is really crazy. Shall we do 17? Let's go with 16. Let's go with 16. Everybody should be doing this with me right here. Step 1, separate it into two groups. Oh yeah, by the way, you can't pull out anything from all four terms. You might be thinking, oh, I could pull out the multiple of 2 times 2 times 2. Oh, this doesn't work. There are no x's, there are no y's in all the groups, or in all the terms. So we're going to separate it into two groups. 6xy minus 8x plus 15y minus 20. In your first group, what could you pull out? A 2 and not only a 2, but what else could he pull out? An x. So what's going to be left on the inside?
3y minus 4.
3y minus 4. Okay. So on the second group, what could I pull out? A 5. So if you pull out a 5, you're also going to have a 3y minus 4. And that's a good thing because you have a common binomial in the first group and the second group, and that's a common binomial that we're going to factor out of the whole thing. So I always use exaggerated parentheses. I pull out that common binomial of 3y minus 4, put it out there in the front. And on the inside of my exaggerated parentheses, all I have left is the 2x and the positive 5. And there's a blank spot just to show you. But of course, the correct size parentheses, 3y minus 4 times 2x plus 5 is the final answer right there. So I'm hearing some of you guys say it's easy. It's not easy yet. It'll become easy once you do it over and over and over. Okay?
Don't you have to put a plus up there?
You know what, guys? Instead of moving on to 17, I'm going to save that one for later because I know that's a tasty problem. Let's do 18. Then we'll jump back to 17 if we have time. So, what should I do first?
Separate it.
Separate it into two groups?
Yes. Please.
I could, or I could pull out the GCF first. It's totally up to you. Oh wait, there is no GCF. Okay. So let's just start separating into two groups, right?
Yes.
12a squared minus 15ab space minus 16a plus 20b. First group, what could I pull out? A 3 and an a. If I pull out a 3 and an a, what's going to be left over? 4a. That's right, because 3a times 4a will get us back to the 12a squared. How about 3a times what will get us back to minus 15ab?
5AB.
Minus 5b. You can't put an a right there because then it'd give you an a squared up here, and you don't want an a squared. Okay, so how about the other one? Now, this is a great problem to do because this one's weird. Check it out. What could I pull out of the second group? What could I pull out of the second group?
4.
I could pull out a 4, right? Now, check this out. If I pull out a 4, what would be left in here?
Negative 4.
A negative 4a, and what about over here? A positive 5b. And look, this is a positive 4a and a negative 5b. So you want it to be an identical binomial. So if you see, I might as well show it. You're going to have a negative 4a and a positive 5b, and you see that they're not the same binomial. They're almost the same, but they have different signs. So what we should have done, instead of pulling out a regular 4, we should have pulled out a negative 4. Pull out a negative 4. That way, when you think, okay, negative 4 times what will get us a negative 16a? That'll be a positive 4a. And when you say negative 4 times what will get us a positive 20b? That'll be a minus 5b. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So by pulling out a negative with the 4, it'll actually get us the same identical binomial. And that's what we need. We need an identical binomial. So now that we have the identical binomial in both groups, I could do the exaggerated parentheses and pull out that common binomial of 4a minus 5b. And on the inside of the exaggerated parentheses, you're going to have that 3a left over and that minus 4 left over. So your final answer is 4a minus 5b times 3a minus 4. This is your answer. If you were to do distributive property, it would take you back to the above polynomial.
So if you would have left it with the minus and the plus, you would have
If I wouldn't have pulled out a negative with the 4, then this wouldn't have been the identical binomial and I wouldn't be able to pull it out. So sometimes you'll see, oh, this is the binomial is the same as that one, but they're opposite signs. That means I need to pull out a negative sign to get them to be the same. And that happens on 17. Going back to 17, two groups, negative 6 MP. Actually, before two groups, would you guys like to pull out what's in common first? Or should we factor it all and then pull out what's in common on the inside of our parentheses later? Do it first. All right, so what could I pull out of all four terms? 2. So what I'm going to do is put a 2 bracket, and on the inside of the brackets, I'm going to put the negative 6 MP. Negative 3 MP plus 2M plus 9P minus 6. And then we could focus in on the inside of the brackets, and we have 4 terms. I'm going to factor by grouping. I'm going to make 2 groups. So I have negative 3 MP plus 2M space plus 9p minus 6. Now in our first group, what could I pull out? Okay, so some of us are saying negative m. That'd be great because that negative will become a positive, and we see that one first one's positive, so that might help us, right? So let's pull out a negative m because there's m's in both terms on the first group. So we're going to do negative m, and over here, what can we pull out? A 3. Okay, so if I do pull out a negative m from these two groups, what will I have left over right here? In other words, negative m times what gets us a negative 3mp? A 3p. And then yes, minus 2. And then over here, if I pull out the 3 from both, what's going to be left? A 3p minus 2. Now, if we would not have pulled out a negative, if we would have just said m, then we would have had completely opposite binomials, and you'd have to additionally pull out another negative. So that's why it's important that we pull out a negative sign right here. Okay, so now we have the same binomial on both terms. I'm going to do exaggerated parentheses. And right here, I'm going to pull out the common binomial 3p minus 2. What do I have left over on the inside? Negative m plus 3. So, our final answer, let's not forget about the 2 out here. Bring it down. And then I'll have 3p minus 2. And then a minus m plus 3. But, if you look at the answers, I believe they're not going to leave this as a negative. I'm not sure. Check the answer. I think they might have actually factored out a negative 1 from there as well, making it a negative 2 out here, and that being a positive m and a negative 3. Yeah? So right here on this part, just to make it look nicer, they pulled out a negative 1 from both of these terms, changing it to the final answer 2, 3p minus 2, positive m minus 3. But of course, the negative sign that we pulled out of here, we need to put it out here in front of the 2. So there's the final answer.